holding authorities to account or putting innocent people in danger. In this edition of the Newsmakers, we ask if Wikileaks has gone too far. Also on today's program, how protests over hairstyles at a girls' school in South Africa have triggered a national debate on racism. And in Picture This, harrowing images from the Mediterranean as 10,000 refugees are rescued in just 3 days. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. The stated goal of the Wikileaks website is to bring important news and information to the public, but its method of publishing online thousands of unvetted, often classified documents is once again raising questions. An investigation by the Associated Press has found that recent leaks have put thousands of private citizens at risk by publishing their contact details and even in some cases identifying rape victims. The issue plays into a classic debate on liberty, how to balance the right to freedom of expression with the right to privacy. But it also raises a more basic question of whether the website and its founder, Julian Assange, are simply acting irresponsibly. Today's Newsmaker is Wikileaks, as we ask whether it has gone too far and risks losing popular support.
It's known for revealing classified information to the public. For more than a decade, Wikileaks has exposed state secrets and corruption online and forced world leaders to answer. It revealed human rights abuses at Guantanamo Bay and leaked documents on civilian casualties during the Iraq War. The whistleblower's site is no stranger to controversy, and it hasn't bowed to pressure either.
I can assure that we will keep publishing documents. That's what we do.
In 2008, Wikileaks posted secret Scientology manuals. And when lawyers representing the church demanded that they be removed, it responded by publishing more. And it hasn't spared anyone. Millions of documents have exposed the U.S. National Security Agency, the Saudi government, and most recently the U.S. Democratic National Committee. But that library is also filled with a catalog of personal records, turning this whistleblower into a weapon. An AP report shows that Wikileaks has published personal details of private citizens, including medical files, social security numbers, and financial information, and that many of the leaks have the potential to endanger lives, like the Saudi cables. They have named a Saudi citizen who'd been arrested for being gay, a revelation that could endanger his life in a country where there's a backlash against homosexuals. Sensitive private data, like whether or not a Saudi bride was a virgin when she got married, have also been released. Other leaked information include details of people who have sexually transmitted diseases, including AIDS, or who were raped. Saudi cables also identified domestic workers who'd been tortured or sexually abused by their employers, giving the women's full names and passport numbers. Wikileaks founder said in the past, "We can't sit on material like this for 3 years with one person to go through the whole lot, line by line, to redact." As a result, it has published identity records, phone numbers, and other information that can easily be exploited by criminals. Like a massive leak of database in Turkey with information on almost every adult woman in the country. Wikileaks has argued that it has a system to keep ordinary people's information safe. But with more and more unvetted information released, has it put innocent citizens in danger? Christine Pirovolakis, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from Hobart in Australia is Greg Barnes. He's a legal advisor to Julian Assange and Wikileaks. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Barnes. Is Wikileaks getting to the point where, in some instances, it's doing more harm than good, and that needs to be fixed?
Look, I don't think so, Imran. I think that listening to your report and watching your report as we came in, I mean, Wikileaks, as I understand it, has always had a very good system for vetting private information. I ought to say that that private information is readily available in various other forms. Now, can I say, for example, when the Panama Papers were released, there was a huge amount of financial information on individuals and addresses of individuals, and I didn't notice that the media on that occasion were taking issue.
We're not talking about the Panama Papers. We're talking about what AP went through, and they went through a sampling of tens of thousands of documents, and they found personal details about private citizens, social security numbers, medical files, sensitive family and financial information, like, for example, 2 teenage rape victims in Saudi Arabia, as well as the name of a Saudi citizen who had been arrested for being gay. You can't tell me that's the same as somebody hiding their tax returns or hiding dodgy money in Panama, can you?
No, what I'm saying to you is that in terms of personal data that's released, personal data is personal data. I haven't seen the AP report. That's the first thing I should say. Secondly, there is simply no evidence that the release of information by WikiLeaks has led to any crimes being committed on any individual.
So let me ask that the other way around.
Hang on, any individual
what possible benefit, let me turn that around then. What possible benefit is there to this information being released, to the information that includes the identities of rape victims in Saudi Arabia?
Well, let me say firstly, as I say, I haven't seen the AP report, and I want to look at that firstly before I commented upon it. If you're right in relation to rape victims, then that's a serious matter, but I'd want to have a look at it. The second thing I'd say about it is that in relation to data that's released by WikiLeaks, much of that data has been publicly available in various other formats and amounts to republication. It's not as though that they've trawled through private information of individuals and published it for the first time.
No, well, so you haven't read the AP report. Within that, you have confidential Saudi government communications, which includes information about private citizens, which is not readily available in the public, which WikiLeaks made public, which potentially puts these young girls at risk, and the Saudi who was arrested for being gay. So let me give you this. If I'm right and the AP is right, and what I'm saying is in the AP report because you say you haven't read it, if that is verifiable, would you accept that perhaps WikiLeaks was reckless?
Well, look, what I'd say about that is that you should always be very careful in relation to the release of personal information. Of course, no one would argue against that. What I'm saying is I haven't seen that report. I'm not the legal advisor, Julian. I'm one of his team around the world, and I do some of his work in Australia, but I haven't seen that report. But I don't disagree with you when you say that personal information about individuals, if it enables that person to be identified in terms of where they live, for example, then that's always a matter of some conjecture. Now, having said that, this, of course, is not the first time that we've seen data released in this sort of format in other arenas,
right.
I say.
And again, we're talking about other arenas, you know, apples, oranges. We have billionaires hiding their money in Panama versus teenagers who are rape victims in Saudi Arabia. Big difference between the two.
Well, hang on, Imran. Let me make this point very clear to you. As I say, you keep making the point about these 2 rape victims. I'm not aware of that particular case. I've already agreed with you that when it comes to victims of crime, and I know because I'm a criminal barrister, if it comes to victims of crime, care must always be taken. I've agreed with that point. But I think there's a broader point to be made here, and that is that a lot of the information, for example, that's released by WikiLeaks, relates to individuals who are in the public eye. If you look at the DNC emails, for example, most of these people are in the public eye.
Okay.
And it's all very well for people to turn around and say, oh, we want privacy now, when they're very happy to expose other people and expose themselves.
Fair enough. Now, with the US Embassy cables in 2010, WikiLeaks worked very closely with The Guardian. They worked very closely with the New York Times. They worked with Al Jazeera. I was at Al Jazeera at the time, and I remember how closely they worked with WikiLeaks. Journos went through the files beforehand. They sort of passed through what was relevant and what was not. And there was this kind of triage or this sort of vetting process where you had qualified people who had the capability to then filter out what might not be relevant, what might be dangerous, what might put people at risk. Why isn't this sort of thing happening anymore? Why is there just the sort of mega dump that's happening every time WikiLeaks comes out with files?
Well, I don't think that's right. I don't think there is a mega dump. And certainly there, as I understand it from talking to Julian in the past, there are processes in place. I don't think it's fair to say that there's a mega dump. As I say, if you look at the DNC material, most of that material, which was extremely important in exposing the corruption in the Democratic Party in the US, most of that material was, you could tell that, some material wasn't put there, other material was. It's not simply a mega dump, as I say. One always has to be careful with these issues, and one also always has to be careful in how information's released. But WikiLeaks, I don't think, has ever been accused of just a mega dump in the same way, for example, that the Panama Papers were a mega dump.
So you say there is redaction. Interesting that WikiLeaks tweeted after the AP story. Now, the AP story spoke about the Saudi cables. It didn't talk about the DNC dump, right? It didn't talk about those revelations.
Sure.
But WikiLeaks tweeted, US big media scramble to side with presumptive winner Clinton. We expect many more recycled attacks like AP's today as our leaks continue. You, surely, Greg, you can't believe, as WikiLeaks does, as they tweeted, that this is a big conspiracy by pro-Clinton media, can you?
Oh, look, I've got no doubt that, and I don't believe in conspiracy theories, Imran, but you don't have to be on this planet for very long to understand that when it comes to US politics and to understand the way big media and established media works with politicians, it is corrupt. There is absolutely no doubt that there are some journalists who are in the pocket of Hillary Clinton. I don't mean in the financial pocket, but I mean getting leads on stories, etc. I've worked in politics and I've seen it happen. What people don't like about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks is that they break the mould, they break the model. They're not established in that sense. They are a bit like Uber in the taxi industry. And there's no doubt that mainstream media has gone after Assange on a number of occasions. I've witnessed that. I've seen, for example, in his home country of Australia, the Australian media virtually ignore him, despite the fact that he's the most high-profile Australian incarcerated, effectively, overseas. So I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but what I do say is that there are regular attacks on WikiLeaks, and those attacks are made by what you would call the mainstream media.
But I guess media is sharpening their knives.
It has attacked.
Fair enough, but I guess media has an incentive to sharpen their knives. When WikiLeaks messes up and you have these details, particularly of these Saudis, again, I mentioned, go out, and instead of saying, hey, sorry, we might have messed up, WikiLeaks says, hey, it's a massive Clinton media conspiracy.
Well, I've already said to you that if your assumption is right, and I haven't seen the report and I'd want to see it, and if the assumption that AP makes is right, and you are, of course, assuming that AP is right, we don't know if it is, but if it is right...
we're going down this... but we're going down a rabbit hole, like how do we know if anything is right? Are we going to question every premise about everything?
Imran, I've learnt as a lawyer to question the premise, particularly when the media.
But I think as a lawyer talking about WikiLeaks on this issue,
when a media outlet says,
but they're quoting what was in the WikiLeaks, what was in the WikiLeaks revelations themselves. They weren't making them up, and I do think it's probably in your best interest to read the AP report. Final question for you, please, Greg. We're running out of time. I have a final question for you. Final question, please.
Let me make this point.
Make it briefly and then a final question.
I'll make a very brief point.
Okay.
I'm not accusing AP of being in conspiracy.
Right.
I'm saying I'd like to check it for myself before I comment on it.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I think that's
Fair
a reasonable
enough.
position.
Granted. The AKP files in Turkey, there was a leak here in Turkey. For a period of time, every female voter in 79 provinces had her personal details leaked, including mobile numbers. What's the value in that at all, Greg?
Well, what's the context?
What's
the context here?
It was a leak of emails from the ruling party. Within that, it had the phone numbers of every female voter from 79 provinces. You tell me what's the value in that, Greg?
Again, I'm not across that particular issue. I'd want to have a look at it before I commented upon it. I might say that there's no great love in many parts of Turkey, as I know, for the ruling party. And if it's part of a broader piece of information that's going out about the ruling party, it may have some value. I'd want to have a look at it.
Okay, so two things I want you to have a look at, and you promised to have a look at: the AP report and the AKP leaks in Turkey as well. And we'll try and get you on again at a later date. Greg, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much, Greg Barnes.
Thank you.
Coming up next on the Newsmakers, how a group of South African students got their school to suspend its controversial rules on hairstyles. And in Picture This, rescued from a perilous journey, almost 10,000 people are pulled to safety in the southern Mediterranean. School rules have always been a source of tension between students and teachers. But a rule over how students are allowed to wear their hair at a private girls' school in South Africa has highlighted a much bigger issue about racism in the country. Black students at Pretoria High School for Girls say the school is discriminating against them, and their protests have caught the world's attention. Let's take a look.
A protest over school rules has triggered a national debate in South Africa.
They're going to arrest us, guys. They're going to arrest us.
Black students at Pretoria Girls High say their school's hair policy is racist. They say they're banned from wearing their hair naturally, as they're told to straighten their afros because they look untidy.
If your hair is neatly tied and your afro is neatly tied, why must you be apologetic for being a black African child in South Africa? Why do black girls always receive the shortest end of the stick?
The girls' protest has gone viral. The hashtag #StopRacism at Pretoria Girls High has been used more than 150,000 times. And more than 10,000 people have signed an online petition against the school's policy. Local authorities have asked the school to suspend its hair regulations and say there will be an independent investigation into the allegations of racial discrimination. This protest has raised the wider issue of racism in South Africa, with these girls feeling they have to fit into a white mould to get an education. Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Pretoria is Mishka Wazar. She is a former student at Pretoria High School for Girls and a reporter at the Daily Vox. Mishka, thanks so much for joining us. So the school had these rules as part of their code of conduct, but was it really essentially saying that the default hairstyle for black girls was untidy, was rude, was unruly and subversive? Did it essentially say to black girls, hey, just being yourself is not cool?
Yes, basically that's what the rules were saying. I believe that from my experiences at the school, that most of those rules pertaining to hair and uniform are borderline racist and discriminatory towards black girls in particular, because most of the black students at the school were not from economically advantaged backgrounds, and the rules did not really allow them to express themselves in terms of cultural identity or even to reclaim any kind of progressive blackness, which is a new sort of political movement in South Africa almost.
Mm-hmm. Now, this was almost semi-expected when I was a teenager at school and things were changing in the country, transitioning from apartheid. There were times, at times I played cricket and other things at private schools where we had to almost sort of dissolve into a white subculture and play by these rules and feel ashamed of where we came from. But I would have thought that a lot of this stuff would have gone away in 2016. How is it possible that Pretoria High School for Girls still had this and it was enforceable in the school in this year?
I completely agree with you that you would think in 2016, so many years after apartheid's ended, that these rules would be gone. But I think that one of the most important aspects, or one of the most important reasons that this sort of white assimilation continues to be pervasive in South African society, in particular former Model C schools, is that they place a lot of emphasis on tradition. Now, most of these schools, for Girls High in particular, which is a former Milner school, they tend to sort of want to perpetuate that sort of English, disciplinarian, traditional upbringing for the girls. But the problem with that is that those traditions are not the traditions of most of the girls who attend that school. So what they're really saying is that they want to sort of force you to assimilate into this ideal of white femininity in that school in particular. And that's very damaging and very dangerous to the psyche of many girls of color who attend that school. Because at the end of the day, once you matriculate or graduate, you become whitewashed.
Is this a conundrum facing many black, or maybe I can broaden this out, just to sort of many non-white parents and children who might be middle class, who might be earning a little bit of money and want to give their children the best? The public schools in many towns and cities in the country are not in great shape, so they want to send their kids to the best schools. They spend a lot of money, and it's almost taken as part and parcel of the whole thing. You have to assimilate, and the kids have to lump or bite the bullet with a lot of this stuff in order to get a good education.
Yes, that's exactly what the case is. I think that because of the state of education in the country and the state of many schools, if you can afford to send your child to a former Model C school, that would be the best choice, if not that or a private school. The reason for that is because just like the same way that many universities in South Africa tend to only accept students from these sort of schools, many of the public schools in South Africa don't necessarily teach don't necessarily have the medium of instruction being English, which is becoming or is already a global universal language of instruction. So most parents do want to send these kids to these kinds of schools. But the problem here lies in when these schools decide to stamp out any of the cultural aspects of yourself, of the students. They want to stamp out any of the non-European elements that any student would carry, because why should I have to sacrifice who I am for my education?
We've had that fantastically symbolic picture of young Zulekha, the young girl at the center of this. That image was very powerful, protesting in her school, and there's been tremendous backlash. I mean, we're talking about it here on international television. Have you been encouraged by the backlash nationwide?
I think so. I think that it's sort of taken a kind of nationwide outrage. I think that many schools in the country have begun to now look at their codes of conduct to take away the borderline racist and discriminatory rules, perhaps not out of care for the students or for want of progress, but because of fear of backlash for themselves, for their own institutions. But it's definitely a sign of progress, and I think that what these girls have done is possibly one of the most important thing that probably the most important thing that schools in this country are undergoing today.
Mishka Wazar, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us from Pretoria. In today's Picture This, Europe's refugee crisis is back in the headlines. 10,000 people were rescued in just 3 days from dangerous and overloaded boats off the Libyan coast. All of them risking death for the chance of a better life in Europe. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker was Wikileaks. The whistleblower website has been facing growing criticism after new evidence emerged showing how leaked documents put private citizens at risk. We asked if the website is being irresponsible in the way that it publishes huge batches of documents. But a lawyer representing Wikileaks told us they have a good system for vetting information. He said that care should be taken when it comes to victims of crime, but that the vast majority of information released on the website is about people in the public eye. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. As always, thank you for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.